A few months ago, Dr. Brad Stanfield posted a video in which he explained why he stopped taking Fisetin and Quercetin, two of the most popular supplements in our longevity community. This comes in a total contradiction to the expert opinion of other longevity researchers, such as Dr. David Sinclair, Dr. Paul Robbins, and Dr. James Kirkland. Who is right and who is wrong? This contradiction was based on a new Fisetin study conducted by the prestigious ITP organization showing no lifespan benefits nor senescent cell removal. And in the previous episode, we discovered that the complete study wasn't published yet. But I promise you this. Don't worry, there is more to the story, because we can still do some data interpretation with the data that we do have, and today we're gonna delve deeper into the ITP study that Brad Stanfield based his decision on. What is the ITP? What are their weaknesses that nobody speaks about? And what did they find in their Fisetin study? When I delved into this, I found something that shocked me and I never expected that I'm going to show you today. And do I take Fisetin and Quercetin or shun it like Dr. Brad Stanfield? Let's start. Welcome to the Wellness Messiah podcast. I'm your host, Rimon. What have we found in the previous episode? We found that Fisetin and Quercetin are amongst the only supplements that potentially kill senescent cells. Cells, when accumulated, can accelerate our aging. The other agents that are being researched to kill senescent cells are cancer drugs, which we don't easily have access to. We also found that one of the heads of the ITP, Richard Miller, came out speaking about Fisetin not being effective against senescent cells, nor for longevity. This created controversy with other longevity experts such as Dr. David Sinclair, Dr. Paul Robbins, and Dr. James Kirkland.
You are periodically taking Fisetin and Quercetin aimed at senescent cells.
Myself, I'm on a maintenance dose. I take about half a gram of each every day.
I take the senolytic Fisetin because we have shown it's safe in mice, and there's a number of clinical trials, and it seems to have a benefit. So I take Fisetin.
We also have seen that Dr. Brad Stanfield came about a year ago stating that he stopped taking Fisetin and Quercetin based on this very study, the ITP study. Yet we discovered that the ITP study wasn't published yet, but we did have a little data to interpret. So I asked in the comments, should I do data interpretation now or wait for the full study? Overwhelmingly, everyone wanted me to do it, even though I wasn't so happy to do it, but since I have a weak character, according to my mother, I have to succumb to the desire of my masters, you. To start our investigative work, we have to be good detectives. And to be good detectives, we must have a solid context. What do I mean by that? We need to look at the evidence with the right glasses. This is what context does. And to do that, we have to understand each of the three elements, the three components of the crime scene. So what do we have in this crime scene? First, we have the perpetrator of the experiment, the ITP, aka the humans. We also have the mice, the supporting characters. We need to understand their physiology, what makes them live longer. Why are they even important to our longevity, to your longevity? And we have, of course, Fisetin, the secret agent, the component used to be put into the mice to kill their senescent cells and extend their lives as well. What made our secret agent failed in his mission? So now we will cover each of the three components of this crime scene, involving humans, mice, and Fisetin. Let's start with the ITP, the perpetrators. What is the ITP, and should we trust the results? The ITP is a collaboration between three research labs that ran lab experiments on longevity in mice in three different locations. The ITP has four major strengths that give them the gold standard acclaim in longevity research. Let's cover them right now. The first is they test longevity directly. They test the effect of different molecules, drugs, and supplements on the longevity and lifespan of mice. This is very important for us because most of the research money in medicine goes to diseases, not longevity. And here, this organization tests longevity directly, exactly what we need. Another strength of the ITP is that this organization doesn't sell drugs or supplements. When human beings sell things, they tend to publish data that supports the sale of those very things. Funny thing, so the ITP doesn't suffer from this issue. It lacks commercial bias. This is why they call themselves an objective research organization. Objective as humanly possible, of course. This means that we can trust more their data. Another strength of the ITP is the replication of the experimentations. The ITP replicates the same experiments in 3 different test sites. It's almost like a control on the researchers and the lab. This is great. Let's hear now Dr. Richard Miller, one of the head researchers of the ITP, speaks about that.
The drugs are tested in 3 separate laboratories, mine at the University of Michigan, Randy Strong's at the University of Texas in San Antonio, and at the Jackson Labs in a program headed there by David Harrison and Nadia Rosenthal. We do it at 3 locations because we see a drug that is producing good, strong lifespan benefits at all 3 sites. Then we know that despite site-to-site variations, the drug is likely to work when it's tested at someone else's site as well.
A 4th strength of the ITP is that the ITP uses healthy and diverse mice. As we said, most medical research focuses on diseases, not longevity. And for studying diseases in mice, you want to create a genetic variant of this specific disease. So in many studies, you're already starting with a mouse that has some genetic predisposition towards some future catastrophe. Therefore, these mice are not a very good representation of the average healthy mouse. This is bad for us because we now one step further away from converting these results into healthy humans. It becomes a very far extrapolation from mice to humans. And it makes the study not relevant at all for our situation, especially if we're healthy. The ITP doesn't have that problem. They use healthy mice. I'm reading about their mice type from their website. How are the experiments conducted? Agents are administered into the food of groups of specific pathogen-free male and female mice that are genetically heterogeneous. Each mouse is observed until its natural death or until it becomes so severely ill that survival for more than an additional week seems very unlikely. So they're using healthy mice, but they also use the term heterogeneous mice. What does this mean? Heterogeneous, in simple language, means diverse in character or content. In medical research in mice, it means that the ITP doesn't use one genetic strain of mouse. What the ITP does is that they purchase mice that are brothers and sisters of the same parents. In essence, they use mice that are a blend of 2 genetic pools of the 2 parents. Therefore, they have a wider range of DNA to work with, but it's still close family. It's not a complete representation of all healthy mice on this planet. However, it does give us a better variety of mice genes, and it reduces the dependency on one weird gene pool, you see? To combine these 2 characteristics, the ITP uses a group of mice that is healthy, varied a bit genetically, and a better representation of a group of a normal, healthy mice. Thus, it's a closer extrapolation to humans, and maybe human longevity. Just to summarize, we spoke about the following strength of the ITP. Testing longevity directly, the organization doesn't sell drugs or supplements lacking commercial bias, replication of the experiment on 3 different locations, and using healthy and somewhat diverse mice. And all those 4 reasons are why the ITP plays an important data source for our longevity community. This is why many experts in our community give them the accolade, the gold standard. And this is why many of the longevity research videos on this channel are based on their research. I am grateful and we are grateful for the ITP work. However, the ITP also has weaknesses. That's the juicy part that you never hear any other place. So let's cover these weaknesses right now. The first weakness is the ITP is an organization run by human beings. Sounds silly, huh? But when dealing with organization names and accolades with gold standards, we have to remember that behind everything, there are simple human beings, just like you and me. And these human beings can make mistakes in the way they design the study, in the dose they're using, how they measure the results, the interpretation, and so forth. The second weakness is that the ITP doesn't test synergy. Imagine that you and I are going to conduct a study on muscle growth. We want to know, does a good night of sleep help to grow muscles? So we took 1 million people and isolated the sleep component. We took those people and improved their sleep quality to see if they grow new muscles, but without exercise or healthy nutrition. What do you think? Will we see a muscle mass growth? No. Next, we're gonna test high-intensity exercise with poor nutrition and poor sleep. Will it show muscle mass growth? I've done it myself, and I can tell you, I actually lost muscle mass when I do high-intensity training with poor sleep and bad nutrition. This happens due to a poor recovery. Then we're gonna take the third component, high-quality nutrition, poor sleep, and no exercise. What do you think? Will we see muscle growth here? Yes. Seriously, no. In each of these 3 tests, we'll see no results of muscle mass growth. But what happens when you combine those 3 together? You get a massive amount of muscle growth, just like I found in my experiment when I gained 8 pounds of pure muscles, not fat here, in just 4 weeks, when I was 32. Now, why is that? It's because our bodies work on metabolic synergy. Your body is a holistic system. Everything affects everything. Sometimes 1 is 0, and 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 6. Synergy is so effective because pushing the body to achieve the results that you want requires the cooperation of different things that work together. And the ITP doesn't test that. The ITP tests single molecules and their lone effect on aging. Their experiment is still valid, is extremely valuable, but is something to bear in mind when interpreting their data. The third weakness is that many of their studies are done on pharmaceutical drugs. This is a list from their past experiments. Every blue arrow represents a drug, not a supplement. As you can see, a large portion of the molecules that they test are drugs, not supplements, and these drugs are possibly have negative side effects. And second, they require prescription, so you and I don't have the access to these drugs to extend our lifespan. So this weakness is not a research weakness, but it's a practical weakness for healthy people, just like you and me. This means that if you're healthy, like most of our longevity community, you won't have access to their findings. It's probably going to help in future research and maybe in potential access to drugs in the future, but not for us right now. And this is a weakness. And I totally understand that, and this is why on this channel I try to not publish videos on drugs for longevity, because I know that you are most likely healthy and you're not going to be able to use this information practically. Not only that, you may not even want to take pharmaceutical drugs to live longer. By the way, if you want my entire supplement routine, my patrons or patreon.com on youth level can get my entire supplement routine and all the special brands that I'm buying. And I don't work nor I compensated by any supplement company. The last and the most important weakness of the ITP. They test mice, not humans. The ITP boasts, for a good reason, that the fact they are using healthy, heterogeneous mice. But still, they are testing longevity in mice. Why does it matter? And mice are the second component of our crime scene. They are the supporting actors to the ITP, yet to win Academy Awards. Let's know them a little better now. If you've heard Dr. David Sinclair speaks about his studies, such as NMN or resveratrol, usually he's doing these studies on mice. Why? Why that is, and could it be that we are making the wrong conclusions based on that model? Mice are studied in longevity research and other types of research because they are in many ways similar to us. They are our evolutionary distant cousins. What does it mean, distant evolutionary cousins? To give you a perspective, this is our accepted yet very limited understanding of life itself. This understanding includes the evolution over billions of years. So here's how it goes. We believe that single cells probably existed 3.5 billion years ago. We don't have the footage, but that's what we think. Then, at some point, life as we know it, which includes the development of fish and then trees, started about 500 million years ago. And at some point, very later afterwards, mammals began to develop. In mammals, we are different because we grow our babies inside of us for a while and then breastfeed them. So we have single cells, life as we know it, and then mammals. And from these mammals came eventually humans and mice. And we believe that mice and humans had a shared mammal grandfather somewhere around 90 million years ago to 75 million years ago. So as you can see, we're kind of part of the same family, mice and humans. Because of this genetic closeness, in the perspective of 75 million years compared to 500 million years or 3.5 billion years, mice and us are similar. Specifically, mice bodies, just like ours, have systems. Mice are not singular cells like yeast that Dr. David Sinclair studied, and they're not multicellular organisms like worms. They have systems with organs, hearts, liver, brains. Mice are omnivores. This means they can eat plants and animals, just like us. Because we're omnivores as well, this suggests a closer digestive system between mice and us. And lastly, of course, mice, as we said, are mammals. Birds and reptiles have systems, but they lay eggs and don't lactate. Mice do, just like us. Now we understand why so many medical studies are done on mice. However, we also need to know how mice differ from us in order to interpret mice studies correctly, especially longevity studies. So what are the differences between mice and humans? First, as you know, the speed of their metabolism. Mice live faster and die faster than humans. That's good for longevity, but we need to change doses when converting doses of supplements and drugs from mice to humans. Please note that the conversion of doses from mice to humans is typically based on surface area rather than the speed of metabolism because it provides a more accurate and reliable method for dose scaling between different species. And because mice have a larger body surface area relative to their weight compared to us humans, usually it's common to divide by 12.3 in order to achieve the dose that we need to take. The good thing about my studies is that instead of studying humans and waiting for 80 or 90 or maybe 100 years, mice do that in 2 to 3 years, and we can see the impact on their longevity very quickly. Another major difference is that mice miss many of our brain genes. These are the specific genes relating to our cognition. For example, in this study, University of Chicago found that most of the new genes since our separation from mice about 75 million to 90 million years ago related to our brain, to our cognitive aspects. I'm quoting from this study. Accelerated recruitment of new brain development genes into the human genome. There is a significantly larger proportion of young genes expressed in the fetal or infant brain of humans than in mouse. I know I'm digressing from longevity here, but it means that we cannot translate brain research from mice to humans, especially the cognitive areas of our brains. The genes are simply not there, and this is why cognitive research is done on monkeys and on humans. But the point I want you to understand is that the difference between mice and humans affect the research. And the last major difference between mice and humans that directly has to do with longevity has to do with this: the main causes of death. So, we have mice who live in the wild, which have their own common causes of death, most of which are starvation or being eaten by some other animal. We are not talking about them. We are talking about lab mice, stuck in a cage, fade nicely throughout their entire lives. And lab mice mainly die from one disease. Can you guess what it is? Let's hear Dr. Richard Miller from the ITP research states that himself.
Our mice are not dying of diabetes. They don't get diabetes. About 80% of them are dying of some form of cancer. There are many kinds of cancer in these mice, but about 80% of the deaths are attributable to cancer.
Also, let's hear Dr. Rhonda Patrick speaking about this cancer issue with mice studies for longevity.
You know, mice are dying from like cancer, right? Like cardiovascular disease. They're not dying from the same diseases. And it's not even the same type of cancer that humans get. Like we get a lot of these epithelial, like tumors, solid tumors. They're like dying from lymphomas.
Right.
And, you know, like so there's a lot of differences there as well.
So Dr. Miller said that 80% of lab mice die from cancer. Why is that a crucial part to understand? Because it means that if you reduce cancer, you will increase their lifespan. If you don't reduce cancer in mice, the ITP will find that the drug or the supplement doesn't increase lifespan, and the drug isn't effective for longevity. In essence, cancer in mice is the limiting factor for the lifespan. Have you heard of the drug called rapamycin? It increased lifespan in all mice models. And that includes the ITP studies and others. And rapamycin, what it does, it reduces cancer by targeting a mechanism called mTOR. So this comes at no surprise that rapamycin proved effective to increase mice lifespan in all 3 locations in the ITP study, which you can see right now. And this shows you that mice respond very strongly to agents that reduce cancer. But why do mice are so susceptible to cancer? Well, nature doesn't expect mice to live that long, as they live in lab conditions. In natural environment, they are much more likely to be eaten before they get very old. Therefore, nature hasn't bestowed them with a robust anti-cancer protection system like you and me have. Therefore, we humans are different. Nature knows that we need to take care of our children and grandchildren. And nature knows that somebody has to pay for college. And if it's not the parents, it has to come from the grandparents. So we have this robust anti-cancer protection. And due to that, and due to a longer lifespan, we humans have other diseases of aging that kills us besides cancer. We have 4 major causes of death that kills most of the population. Let's hear now Dr. Peter Attia that speaks about that.
To our last analysis, 82% of deaths above the age of 50 in the United States, excluding COPD. So if you take out the obvious smoking-related death of COPD, 82% of death is attributable to cardiovascular disease, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and complications of diabetes.
As Dr. Peter Attia said, the 4 major causes of death in humans are cardiovascular disease, which includes stroke and heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, and cancer. If we want to live longer, we need to reduce all of them. And now, here is the kicker. What role does cancer play in human mortality? Cancer is responsible for 24% of death in most developed countries. For example, this is from the UK Cancer Research. But that's not the whole story, because that number includes people who smoke. Smoking, as you know, increases cancer rates. And most people in our longevity community do not smoke. And neither most mice. So to have a more apt comparison with mice, whom, as far as I know, don't smoke, we need to exclude the smoking population. Then the cancer death rate should be even lower. I need Peter Attia to do the statistics of non-smokers, but cancer is probably responsible for 22, maybe 21% of death risk. For simplicity, let's round it up to a nice 20%. Not very scientific, but it's more comfortable to use. Only 20% of non-smoking people die from cancer, yet cancer kills 80% of mice, of lab mice. In other words, mice respond 4 times stronger than humans to interventions that reduce the cancer risk. Now, why this is crucial for longevity research? Why this is the biggest weakness of the ITP? Because when measuring lifespan in mice, we are measuring the effect of the supplement or the drug on reducing cancer. And molecules, drugs, or supplements that don't reduce cancer rate, but will reduce cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and Alzheimer's won't affect mice much, but they can affect our lifespan and even our health span. What if we kept our bones strong? What if we have a younger body, but we still have the same lifespan? We won't necessarily know this if we focus on mice and the lifespan. The bottom line is this. If a supplement helps to reduce Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, or cardiovascular disease, it will help us live longer, but won't help mice live longer, unless they are obese. And this explains beautifully why resveratrol, for example, helps obese mice live longer, yet it won't make mice on irregular diets who die from cancer live longer. To summarize, the 4 weaknesses of the ITP are: the ITP is an organization run by human beings that are prone to make mistakes like any other research organization. The ITP doesn't test synergy, but mainly the effect of individual molecules. Another weakness is that many of the ITP studies are conducted on pharmaceutical drugs, which are difficult to implement for us right now. And lastly, and the most important weakness, is that the ITP tests mice, not humans. This creates a 4x bias towards cancer-reducing molecules compared to other diseases that also kill us, humans. Just to close this, I want to make this very clear. Don't get me wrong, the ITP is a really, indeed, high-quality data, and it's extremely valuable for our longevity community. All these weaknesses don't take away the value of what they give to our longevity community. It is mainly valuable for us to interpret their data. So far, we covered 2 components of our crime scene. We get to know the perpetrators, the ITP, and also the supporting actors, the mice. And we have Fisetin, the 3rd component in this crime scene. The secret agent, the component used to be put into mice to extend their lives and kill senescent cells. Let's get to know our secret agent a little bit better. So Fisetin is a natural compound produced by plants. It's found in many fruits and vegetables such as strawberries, apples, onions, and cucumbers. Technically, Fisetin is a polyphenol from the family of resveratrol. However, with a major difference, resveratrol belongs to the subfamily of the stilbenes, yet Fisetin and also quercetin belong to a different subfamily called the flavonoids. Now, here is the important thing. Plants produce Fisetin to allow them to resist stress and increase their cells' survival and longevity under stressful conditions. And here is the kicker. We humans, we don't have this plant technology. We cannot make it with our DNA. However, we can borrow this technology by consuming the supplement or from food, potentially making our cells live longer too. Even more, there is a growing body of research around Fisetin that shows that Fisetin can potentially kill senescent cells, both in mice and in humans. These dangerous cells, as they accumulate, they become a burden on our bodies and accelerate aging. And agents that kill them, called senolytics, And fisetin is a possible senolytic, a natural form that can kill senescent cells.
Fisetin is the interesting one. That one is a plant molecule. It's found in grapes. It's found in apples, to high levels, relatively high levels in strawberries. You can now buy that relatively cheaply on the internet.
So if people are like, man, I really want to get into senolytics, the gateway right now, the most accessible place for people is Fisetin.
Well, it is, but it's early days. There's not a lot of data compared to quercetin and dasatinib.
It's worth noting that despite fisetin appears in plants and vegetables, the studies using fisetin are using high concentration of fisetin, usually in a supplement form, to achieve higher doses and higher impact. So now that we understood all three components of our crime scene, it's time to get to the scene and observe the evidence with a magnifying glass. Where should we put our magnifying glass? What are we looking for in this study? Now, as we approach the study, what are we looking for? What are the critical questions that we need to answer? 1. Was fisetin given with food or with water? If fisetin was given in water, it will reduce fisetin absorption. That's a mistake. 2. At what age it was given to mice? Removing senescent cells only benefits health and life expectancy over the age of 55 or 60 equivalent, which is about 24-27 months in mice. If they started the intervention sooner, they may not notice benefits only until the mice age. 3. What other parameters of health did they measure or examine? And 4. How did they measure the senescent cell burden? And 5. What dose of fisetin did they use? Fisetin dose is critical when measuring the impact on senescent cells. Why? Fisetin is part of the polyphenol family. These polyphenols work via something called the tiebreaker system. What these molecules do is they make the DNA in your cells believe that there is stress around, a threat to the cell's survival. Then, in response, the DNA decides what to do based on the amount of stress. The DNA decides whether to make the cell stronger and survive for a longer time or to kill it. And if we want to kill the cell, such as the case with senescent cells, we need to apply a lot of stress, meaning we need high dose of the polyphenol supplement, in this case, fisetin. Let me put a short explanation about how this tiebreaker system works. This was taken from the resveratrol series. A tiebreaker is a method that you and I use to make important decisions quickly. You and I specifically use this tiebreaker decision making when we are making decisions using money and deciding what to do with resources in general. Our bodies and the DNA too use this tiebreaker method in making important decisions. One of those decisions is whether to help a stressed or damaged cell to live longer and repair it, or to get rid of the stressed cell and create a new cell instead. Both options are expensive for the body, and our bodies can only choose one. Now, I said the body is making the decision, but it's not really the body. It's truly the DNA that had its hand on the wheel. And here is how the DNA thinks. If there is a small amount of stress, the DNA is optimistic. It will decide to keep the cell alive. Expensive decision, but it will lead to the youthfulness preservation of the cell. However, if there is a lot of stress or damage, the DNA is pessimistic. The DNA thinks that if it's going to repair this cell with this large amount of stress, it still may not survive. Maybe it's a waste of resources. Here, the DNA decides to get rid of the cell and replace it with a new one. When the DNA sees low levels of resveratrol, it sees low levels of stress. So the DNA turns off bad aging genes and turns up good longevity genes. The DNA makes the decision for the cell to live longer. Longevity. When the DNA sees high concentration of resveratrol in the cell, it sees high levels of stress, and the DNA becomes more pessimistic. It makes the decision to push the cell towards death. Let's kill the cell and create a new one with the parts and energy that we have saved. That makes sense. Now you can easily see why resveratrol will trigger different responses in different doses. So the tiebreaker system says that our bodies and cells respond differently to these polyphenols based on the dose that we are taking. Practically, it means that if we take low dose, it helps the cell to survive, but it won't push it to death if it's senescent cell. If we want to push cells to die, we need to take high doses of fisetin to mimic an environment of high stress, which signals to the DNA this cell has to die right now. And experts such as Dr. Kirkland know this. Dr. James Kirkland has been researching fisetin since early 2000. He knows too that we need high-dose Fisetin to target senescent cells. How much Fisetin is he using in his studies right now? Let's see one of his latest human studies.
The Fisetin trials, and it's to test the efficacy of senolytics. And there's a trial which is just beginning. It's going to be in when it's fully rolled out in 129 nursing homes across the United States. It's funded by the NIH, and this will be for patients who test positive or have tested positive for coronavirus who are nursing home residents.
So in this ongoing study that Dr. Kirkland has mentioned, they are trying Fisetin to kill senescent cells. This is because these cells, when accumulated, worsen our reaction to COVID-19. And the study, they are using 20 milligrams per kilo in human adults, which is indeed high dose. What is high dose and low dose? Well, based on my research, we can say that 15 to 20 milligrams of Fisetin is high dose, whereas 1 to 3 milligrams of Fisetin per kilo in humans is low dose, and it won't push cells to die. Now, our goal is to find out whether the ITP use a high dose Fisetin. Remember, the ITP goal, besides lifespan extension, was to check senolytic activity, to see activity of Fisetin against senescent cells. Now that we have all the investigative questions in our mind, we can look at the crime scene. And we have two data sources. One, the interview with Dr. Richard Miller, one of the heads of the ITP, and two, a summary of the study on the website of the ITP. Let's do some data interpretation and find a very interesting detail. So what do we know about this Fisetin study? First, we have the interview.
And we were given a drug called Fisetin, which allegedly is a senolytic, allegedly it removes senescent cells. We tried that at 2 different dose regimes. It also had no benefit. But then at the mice we gave it to, they also didn't have any deletion of senescent cells. We were neither able to reproduce the reported health benefit nor the reported change in senescent cells.
We know that Dr. Richard Miller said that Fisetin was tested in 2 dose regimes and did not kill senescent cells, nor conferred any lifespan extension in mice. Of course, we don't know how exactly they measured that, but what else do we know besides what he said? We have a summary on their website. So what do we see here? First, age at treatment initiation, which means when they began to give Fisetin to kill senescent cells. This happened at the age of 20 months. That's good. The greatest improvement in lifespan by reducing senescent cells burden is somewhere around 24-27 months. Not before, but still it's close enough. This is okay. In the interview, Dr. Richard Miller said that they used 2 dose regimes. Did the ITP use 2 different doses? No, they used the same dose, but just in 2 different regimens. The dose is clearly 600 ppm. Now that we see the dose, we know the timing of initiation of the treatment, and we know the results, the impact on senescent cells, and life extension, we have something to work with. Now, let's calculate the Fisetin dose they gave to the mice, and then convert it to humans. Now I'm about to show you all the mathematical calculations. Some people find math interesting, the rest not so much. So if you're one of the only people in this planet that don't like math, including me, then feel free to skip on this section. Now, the calculation. They stated on their website, on the ITP website, that the exact dose was 600 ppm. ppm doesn't tell us much. Can we convert this ppm into milligrams per kilo so we could make sense into the dose that we take of Fisetin? Yes, because on the top of their page, they're saying, I'm quoting, each compound is given in the diet at the following levels, part per million, ppm, which is defined as milligrams of agent per kilogram of food. What does this mean? First, the ITP put Fisetin into the mice food. That's good, because it's going to increase the absorption of this polyphenol, as opposed to putting it in water. And 2, we know that 600 ppm means 600 milligrams of Fisetin for every kilo of food that the mice consumed. It also very important, it means that the dose is in relation to the food's weight, not the mice weight. This means that we have to do several steps in the calculation to convert ppm in the food of the mice into Fisetin dose per body weight in mice and then into humans. Therefore, we need to do the following steps. We need to know how much the mice weigh. Then we need to know what's the weight of their food intake, divide that and to get how much fisetin they received per kilo of weight. And then we need to divide this number by 12.3 in order to convert it to humans. This way, we'll figure out the human equivalent dose of fisetin they give to the mice, and this way we will know if it's high-dose fisetin or low-dose fisetin. So what's the weight of the mice? Well, since the ITP hasn't published the paper, we don't know what's the exact weight of their mice, nor we know the weight of their food. But we are not going to give up. These estimate numbers are pretty much known. So what we're about to do here, we're going to use the weight of the average lab mice on a standard diet, and the average weight of their food on a standard diet. A standard diet means that it's not ad libitum, eat as much as you want, but it's a controlled diet of the exact calories every day. So we can estimate on average how much they ate every day. And we're going to take the numbers from Dr. David Sinclair's study on resveratrol. I'm taking those graphs from the supplemental data of David Sinclair. Here, Dr. David Sinclair and his colleagues told us exactly how much the mice weighed and how much they ate in grams every week. Our main focus is to start from 20 months of age or after 80 weeks, because this is when the ITP started the studies. So this is the graph. The SD means standard diet. This diet is similar to the diet the ITP uses, and it affects the weight of the mice, so we can assume it's going to be similar weights. So as you can see, if we're going to focus on week 80, we can say that the average weight is around 35 grams of mouse at that point. So we have one check mark. Now let's go to the weight of their food. Let's focus on the control SD, the standard diet, the black line, without resveratrol. We don't care about resveratrol here. So we can say that the mice on a standard diet at week 80 ate about 18 grams of food per week. Now, note it's per week, not per day. So we have to divide it by 7 days a week. Then we're going to get about 2.75 grams of food per day. So far, we have 35 grams of mouse that ate 2.57 grams of food per day. Let's use that in order to calculate how much fisetin the ITP gave to the mice. So, assuming similar weight of the mice and similar food intake, how much fisetin did the ITP give to the mice? So we said it's 600 ppm, 600 milligrams of fisetin per 1 kilogram of food. This means that in 2.57 grams of food per day, they receive 1.54 milligrams of fisetin. Now let's figure out how much fisetin did they receive, the mice received, per kilo of body weight. So mice, they weighed 35 grams. They received 1.54 milligrams of fisetin. By simple calculation, we can figure out that per 1 kilo of body weight, they received 44 milligrams of fisetin. Now we can convert this to humans. So we need to divide the dose per body weight in 12.3 because mice have faster metabolism and different surface ratios. So by taking the 44 milligrams, dividing it by 12.3, we achieve a dose that is 3.58 milligrams per 1 kilo of human weight. The mice in the ITP study received in both studies, in both regimens, a dose of fisetin that is equivalent to 3.58 milligrams per kilo in humans. Remember the number 3.58 milligrams per kilo of body weight. Let's compare this with what Dr. James Kirkland has been using in his studies to kill senescent cells in humans. 20 milligrams per kilo of body weight. This is a factor of 6. Practically, if a person weighs 70 kilos or 155 pounds and they want to target senescent cells, they need around 1.5 grams of fisetin. However, the dose that was given in the mice study was equivalent to 250 milligrams for that same person. Can you expect 250 milligrams of fisetin to target senescent cells? If you are part of a longevity community, you know that usually people are taking a much higher doses than that. Are you surprised it didn't kill senescent cells? I want you to double check me. This is what I have said in a previous video on fisetin where I touched exactly this issue. Whether fisetin kills senescent cells like this study showed or not, one thing is certain to me. Exactly like with resveratrol, different doses are going to work differently because they apply the stress tiebreaker like in resveratrol case. Meaning the dose of those supplements matters to what you try to achieve when you take them. So if we want to target longevity pathways, maybe we need to choose low doses in everyday use. But if we want to take quercetin and fisetin to kill those senescent cells, maybe then we need to go up to 1 to 2 grams. Not understanding the doses of those supplements can create controversy too in the research world. If, for example, researchers will examine 100 milligrams of Fisetin and observe no effect on senescent cells, you can throw that study out of the window. It doesn't mean anything. By the way, you can find the link to this video in the description. The bottom line about the dose. It looks like the ITP made a mistake with their Fisetin dose, and they used low-dose Fisetin, which should not work on senescent cells. Does this mean that high-dose Fisetin doesn't kill senescent cells? No. But that's not everything, because this is not the only thing they found in the study. Here is the big question. Cool, you would say, low-dose Fisetin doesn't kill senescent cells. Why hasn't Fisetin extend lifespan in the ITP study? Now we're going to connect it to the previous weakness that we spoke about ITP. The proclivity of mice to die from cancer. And the fact that the ITP, when they test lifespan in mice, they practically test cancer mortality reduction in mice. This means that the true question should be, should we expect low-dose Fisetin to reduce cancer in mice? Now, we lack data about Fisetin, but we know how resveratrol, its polyphenol friend, works. And this is exactly what I said several months ago about resveratrol. I spoke about it after showing resveratrol positive impact on diabetes, strong bones, and better cardiovascular health. So why doesn't resveratrol increase maximum lifespan in healthy mice? This is what I said. How come resveratrol not extending lifespan in healthy mice, but does so in obese mice and potentially obese people? Because you cannot increase the maximum lifespan without reducing cancer and tumors. We want to stay young and alive at the same time. And cancer doesn't care how healthy and young the rest of the body is. It's just a defective cell that hurts the organization. These animals I showed you with the low resveratrol, they died with healthy younger bodies, but with tumors. So how can resveratrol increase the maximum lifespan of obese animals? Let's think about it. Obese animals die earlier because of cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And what resveratrol does? Resveratrol does protect the cardiovascular system, keeps the heart young, and reduces sugar levels. This way, low-dose resveratrol targets the exact reasons obese mice and probably obese people die prematurely. Now you understand the mystery. Now you understand why obese mice and possibly obese people are very likely to live longer in their maximum potential on low resveratrol dose, but not necessarily healthy, thin people. Does that make sense to you? Back to Fisetin. I have to qualify everything that we hardly have any data on low-dose Fisetin. Just like with resveratrol, I believe that low-dose Fisetin might reduce cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and preserving young muscles and bones. However, all of that doesn't help the mice if they still die from cancer. But for humans, it does confer benefit. To corroborate this is a study that they used low-dose resveratrol on mice. They have seen younger bones, younger liver, but this is what they found in relation to cancer. This is a segment about tumor formation in old age. So they dissected the liver of the old mice after they died. I'm quoting, "There was also no decrease in spontaneous tumors at the time of the sacrifice. In particular, spontaneous liver tumors were abundant in mice fed the controlled diet or resveratrol, but rare in caloric restriction mice." They came up with the speculation. It is likely that the effects of resveratrol feeding at lower dose are distinct than those observed with higher doses. If indeed Fisetin is a senolytic, it can only kill senescent cells in high doses. 2. The ITP study indeed used low-dose Fisetin. As expected, it was ineffective against senescent cells. Therefore, their findings don't contradict anything that we already know. In fact, it supports the tiebreaker theory in how these polyphenols work. 3. As we have seen, you extend mice lifespan when you reduce cancer. Low-dose Fisetin, if it behaves similarly to resveratrol, it should not reduce cancer. And this is why it did not increase the mice maximum lifespan. Nothing unusual here. Our understandings are spot on. And of course, let's remember the last very important fact. The ITP hasn't published the study yet. So this limits us from finding more gold nuggets from their study, or finding more mistakes. I look forward to interpreting this whole study of Fisetin by the ITP, and I'm going to put it here on this channel. So if you're a subscriber, you're about to see it when it comes out. Now, what do I do with Fisetin and Quercetin? Do I take them? You're about to discover that, but now it's a great opportunity to thank all my patrons who support me, especially now with my wife's stroke situation. As you noticed, any such video requires a large effort of accurate research, and the patrons give me the moral boost that I need and the help with the cost of living to produce these videos. If you too want to get the Patreon's bonuses, including my complete supplement routine, and support this channel and my wife's situation on the way, you can do that with as little as $1 contribution. You can check the bonuses using the link in the description. Now, what do I do with Fisetin and Quercetin? This is not a personal recommendation or advice to anyone. This is what I do with my body based on my research. And now that we established that Fisetin and Quercetin work differently at low doses versus high doses, when I speak about what I take, I need to address both doses. So remember, high-dose Fisetin and Quercetin are potentially senolytic agents. They potentially kill senescent cells. Do I take high-dose Fisetin and Quercetin? My thinking now is I'm too young for this. I'm 35, thin, and it's unlikely that senescent cell accumulation will be an issue. Especially that these cells play a role in good health, and my immune system is young enough to clear them. Let's hear Dr. Kirkland speaks about which people at what age benefit the most from targeting senescent cells.
Looks like there are situations, for example, in younger female animals where senolytics can actually do some harm. There's some indication in some studies of that. So I think, mice generally, for example, most mouse strains don't have much in the way of detectable senescent cells before 16 months of age. Why would you give senolytics at 4 months of age? They seem to be most effective in the case of mice that are naturally aging without, that are non-disease models, when you give them at 24, 27 months, that kind of age, when there's an accumulation of senescent cells.
I spoke about my age, but obviously over the age of 60, these senescent cells begin to accumulate and cause problems. So my perspective will change when I'm going to be 55 or 60. The older I am, the more frequent I would take it. So maybe if I'm 70, of course, consulting with my doctor first, I would take it every quarter. So the bottom line about what I do is pretty ironic. The irony of this is that Brad and I do the same thing, but we do that for opposite reasons. Brad doesn't take Fisetin and Quercetin because he thinks they don't work against senescent cells. I don't take high-dose Fisetin and Quercetin because I think they do work and I just don't need it right now. Now let's move to the low-dose Fisetin and Quercetin. Do I take low doses of Fisetin and Quercetin daily for health and longevity? Because I do take low-dose resveratrol. I suspect that low-dose Fisetin, somewhere around 50 milligrams or 100 milligrams per day, will have a synergetic effect with low-dose resveratrol because they come from different subfamilies of the polyphenol family. Based on my research, this suggests a good potential for synergetic effect between the molecules. However, I'm waiting for the full study by the ITB to be published before I make up my mind, and also I'm waiting for Dr. Kirkland's human study to come out very soon. So in my routine, the jury is still out. But what do you do in the meantime? Not a medical advice or personal recommendation, but here is my take. Many people who have been taking Fisetin report increased energy or better looking skin. In a situation where Fisetin is unlikely to hurt your lifespan, and not knowing the effect yet on senescent cell for sure, or the specific dose or dose regime to achieve that, in this case noticeable health benefits coming from Fisetin are pretty good case to take it. That's my opinion, but it's your body and your responsibility. This is Fisetin. What about Quercetin? Quercetin is one of the most powerful molecules I've ever encountered in longevity research. Yet it's poorly understood because it does 100 things at once. How does it work and how does it affect your body, your brain? We have enough research to reach conclusions, and we will try to answer these questions in the next episode of this Fisetin Quercetin controversy. The third episode will take me some time because usually for every molecule or supplement that I publish video, I need to go over 100 or 200 studies at least to reach a conclusion that I feel certain about without flip-flopping later and confuse you. And now with my wife's stroke, it's going to take me a bit longer. And by the way, when you see studies that I quote in my research videos, these are just the highlights of many of these dozens, if not hundreds of studies that I've read. Most of the stuff I don't show in my videos because I don't want to bore you to death, and my number one goal is to simplify as much as possible, while showing you some of the pieces of the hard work done in the background. All the behind-the-scenes data is not as important as the habit based on the conclusion from this data. The habit, and not the data, is what gives you all the longevity benefits, assuming that we interpret data correctly. So this is for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Has it given you any insight? If so, consider subscribing to this channel, and I suggest viewing next the resveratrol series. There I explain more about senescent cells, and I explain more about the tiebreaker system and how different doses of these polyphenols affect our body differently. So I'm going to put a link to that in the description and also in the end screen. And until the next episode, remember, the correct data interpretation is everything.